If you struggle with sound design and you want to sound design like the pros, but every YouTube video is talking way over your head and they make the video super complicated and it's super frustrating, well, this video is for you because I'll dumb it down and make it super easy for you to follow step by step through the sound design process. I'm literally going to start at the beginning, take you from beginner to knowing nothing to all the way to a pro level very fast. If you don't know me, I'm Game from BusyWorks Beats.com. I need you guys to smash that like button. We're about to get into this. I need some more enthusiasm from you guys. And if you don't know me, I'm Game from BusyWorksBeats.com. We've trained over 1 million producers around the world. Some are going to work with Drake, Kanye West, Post Malone, Ariana Grande, French Montana, Young Thug, Polo G, Trippie Redd, Lil Baby, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, a long list of folks. So let's hop straight into it here. So the best plugin for sound designing, in my opinion, is called Serum. You do have to buy this. It does not come with FL Studio. It's well worth your purchase. It's the best sound design plugin, in my opinion, because it's just a great utility. Okay, so we're going to initialize the preset. Let's go to our channel rack here, click the plus button, and we're going to load up what's called Serum from the list. You guys, if you have it, you have it. These principles can apply to other plugins, even if you don't have Serum. Now in FL Studio, what we're going to do is go to the channel rack, hit Control L to send this sound to what's called the mixer channel. It will automatically route and assign a mixer channel and rename it for you. So here we have this one called Serum. Now from here, we're going to click a drop down and we're going to go to where it says Wave Candy. Okay, this is another plugin we can use to look at the frequencies that we're crafting. Let's open up Wave Candy. So we have a display and then we have the settings window. So right here on the display, let's right click, go to Spectrum. We're going to left click and make it bigger. Under where it says color, you want to turn this up so it's darker. Max res, turn this all the way up so you can see more frequencies. Also turn the scale up so that you can see the lower frequencies. Okay, so those are the settings I'm using today. Now, the first question we need to tackle is, what is a sine wave? What is a triangle wave? What is a square wave? If we click here in Serum, let's go to analog. Let's go to where it says basic shapes. This is a wave table with different frames of different shapes. So if I switch what's called the wave table position, it's just cycling through the frames of different shapes. The first shape here is called a sine wave, and a sine wave is great for sub bass, bass, 808s, kicks, lead sounds, pretty much Drake-ish pads. It depends on how you use it for a pad, but it's mainly used for super low notes or super high notes. I haven't really seen it used for those middle notes. All right, so this is a great sub bass. Sub bass means we're just playing low frequencies on our keyboard with a sine wave for the most part. And it just fills out the sound, okay? It's the smooth low end of your sound. Now, again, sine waves are great because they are built off of what's called the fundamental frequency. Now, what is the fundamental frequency? And here's where we're going to start explaining the science of sound real quick. If I open up Wave Candy and I play a low note with my bass, I'll turn off the sound for now. So this horizontal line plays a frequency. Okay, let's make it the frequency of 70. Okay, so I'm playing C sharp, which is 70 hertz in this case. Okay, so it's playing a specific frequency. It's only playing one frequency because we're using a sine wave. So sine waves, for the most part, if it's a true sine wave, it plays one frequency. Okay, and this is called the fundamental frequency. So the fundamental frequency is like a body. You put on clothes, but it starts with the body. You have to have a body. You can put on a shirt, you can put on shoes, socks, pants, a hat, but those are extra things you put on the core identity called the body. So think of the fundamental frequency as the core identity of all sounds. Okay, even your voice has the lowest frequency your voice produces is called the fundamental frequency. Or any instrument, okay? So here we have this sound at 70. So that's what a sine wave is. It's just one frequency called the fundamental frequency. Now what happens if I add what's called the second harmonic? So now we need to study a little bit of physics. The harmonic, when people say the harmonic series, we're actually talking about multiples of the fundamental frequency. So for example, if my fundamental frequency is 70 hertz, multiply that times 2 to get the second harmonic. So if I add the second harmonic, theoretically 70 times 2 is 140. So if I add this in, we should visually see 140. And that's exactly what we see on this chart, is the frequency at 140. So what is a harmonic? A harmonic is another frequency added to your fundamental frequency. We are adding frequency content. That's what we're doing. We're adding something into the sound because before it was just one horizontal line. Now it's two. So that means we've added an additional frequency, and that's why sounds with more harmonics sound more full and aggressive. It's because there's literally more information. There's more frequencies that are there. Okay, let's add the third harmonic. So this should theoretically give us 210 hertz. So that's right on point. It gave us a frequency right at 210. So I'm playing the first fundamental. I'm playing the second harmonic, the third harmonic. Okay. And now I have 3 frequencies being played. I'll let you guys hear what this sounds like. So these are 3 different notes, by the way. And that already sounds like a Kanye West type or a house-based bass or lead. And that's because we're playing one note, but it's actually playing multiple notes. Okay, if I exaggerate this, okay, I'm trying to, I'll get back to harmonics later. I won't bore you guys to tears about harmonics. But here's the fundamental frequency, this bass note here. Now, if I add the second harmonic, I'm adding a whole different note. It goes, doo, boo. Okay, so those are 2 different notes. Now, if I add the third harmonic, whole different note. Okay. So even though I'm playing one key on my keyboard, we're playing 3 notes, but it feels like one note, and we call this timbre. But timbre is really just the harmonics of a sound. Okay, so again, I don't want to bore you guys to tears, but the more harmonics you add to a sound, the higher the notes, okay? And we'll get into all that in a second. I'm not going to bore you guys just yet. Okay, so let's initialize. Let's go back to the basic shapes here. So again, the question at hand is what separates a sine wave from a triangle wave? Okay, so that sine wave is only one horizontal frequency. In this case, we'll play it at 70 hertz so that it's easy to measure the harmonics. Now you guys saw when I added the second harmonic, it was 2 times 70. When I added the third harmonic, it was 3 times 70. When I added the fourth harmonic, it was 4 times 70. Or, when I would add the fourth harmonic, it should be 4 times 70. So that's what sound design is all about, is a fundamental frequency stacking harmonics. Think of harmonics as added frequencies because that's what it is. And harmonics are multiples of that fundamental frequency. So now that you understand the basics of what sound actually is, let's hear these different sound waves. So here's a sine wave. Very smooth. Let's go to a sawtooth. Very bitey. Now, why is it bitey? Look at all this frequency information. We have way more frequencies and horizontal lines than we did with the sine wave. Let's go back. Sine wave only has that one horizontal line, but the sawtooth has probably 20 plus, 30 plus horizontal lines. That's a lot of frequencies. Imagine going to a party, there's one person in the party. You're like, okay, cool, it's a small party. The next house you go to is 30 people, 40 people. You're like, okay, this is a big party. That's what the sawtooth is. It's a big party of frequencies. Nextly, let's go to the next waveform, which is like a hybrid of a sawtooth and a sine wave called a triangle wave. But what is a triangle wave? What is it? It's basically a sine wave with softer harmonics going up. So as we see here in this graph, let me turn the sound off, is that when it's yellow, it's more dense. When it's purple or red, it's less dense. So with the sawtooth, it's yellow the entire way, pretty much all the way up to like 20K, which is where we can't even hear past 20K. Okay, and whereas the sine wave is only that horizontal line, but it is yellow, meaning it's very full. Okay, whereas the sawtooth is yellow, meaning it's dense all the way through. That's why it sounds powerful in all these frequencies. But what happens if we go to a triangle wave? It does not sound as aggressive and as bitey. It sounds more smooth, and that's because we don't have as much density in those higher harmonics as we had with the sawtooth. So I think of this as like, I think of the triangle wave as a hybrid between your sine wave and your sawtooth. That's how I think of it. It's just a sine wave with more harmonics. That's how I think of it. Nextly, let's go to a square wave. Now, a square wave sounds as bitey as a sawtooth, but the main difference here is the multiples that we add to the harmonics. So a sawtooth can be even and odd harmonics combined, meaning I can multiply that fundamental frequency times 3, times 4, times 5, times 6, times 7, times 8, whereas a square wave is odd harmonics, meaning I'm only multiplying it by the odd numbers. So that would be 1 times the fundamental, 3 times the fundamental, 5 times the fundamental, 7 times the fundamental, 9, 11. Okay, so all the odd numbers are now being multiplied, which creates a full sound, but it sounds a little bit more hollow. That's the way I think about a sine wave. It's a little more hollow than your sawtooth. Okay, so we'll get into different ways to use a square wave. Then you have what are called pulse waves. And these are basically square waves at different phase points. So they create different widths. It's called pulse width. Okay, but we're referring to how wide this part of the sound is here, this little rectangle shape. In short, the thinner the sound, the thinner the shape here, the less low end you have. Sounds very like lightweight, I'll say. Okay, so there's only really 4 shapes to know. You have a sine wave, you have a sawtooth. Here's a sine wave, sawtooth, triangle wave. Then you have a square wave. Everything else is really a variation of those waves. Now, I will cover something called the noise. So white noise is a little bit different. White noise, what is white noise? Let's look at it. It's basically every frequency playing at once. Now, I'm generalizing here because there's different forms of white noise, and us also make the scale a little bit different. Okay, so white noise is a random distribution of frequencies. So when we played a sawtooth, what made it a sawtooth is that it consistently played, a certain frequency, a certain harmonic. What makes noise is it's just as full as a sawtooth, but it's randomly distributed at every single moment of time. So it sounds scattered and random. So that's why you don't see any horizontal lines, because it's all scattered. Now I'm just going to show you guys what happens if I chisel out this harmonic content with what's called a filter. Then I can create a focus point, for example. I'll just use a bandpass. What happens if I take that noise and I focus it on one specific frequency and I make it more focused and more focused and more focused? It starts to become, instead of scattered, it becomes linear, and then it becomes tonal. Okay, so now we're actually creating a tone because we've chiseled out all of the frequencies and just focused in on one frequency for the most part. So we can create tone from noise. Okay, so I am going a little advanced, but I just want to show you guys what that means. So we've covered what's called the fundamentals. We've covered the shapes. Now let's talk about filters. Okay, so now let's start sound designing so that we give you guys some kind of dopamine hit before you click on to the next video. Okay, so let's go to menu. Let's initialize this. I'll give you guys the dope sound that requires like barely any work. We're going to go to serum in this case, initialize. We're going to set the unison here to 7. That's like the magic number for voice distribution here. So when I play notes, we're just going to pull in this D tune a little bit. Now it sounds very full. And we're going to add what's called a filter. So a filter is our way of chiseling out these frequencies. Okay, so we're basically manipulating the perception of the harmonic distribution of a sound. So by default, you have 3 filter types. You have a low pass filter, you have a band pass filter, and a high pass filter. You guys will get used to these names over time. The most used filter, in my opinion, is a low pass filter because most of the time we chisel out the high notes. Okay, but if you want to chisel out the low notes, you would use what's called a high pass filter. So this chisels out the low notes. Again, rarely used as far as like day-to-day use. And then you have something called a band pass. And again, I would take the time to cover every single detail about this. But a band pass is a high pass filter and a low pass filter. It just it focuses on a frequency group and it can move over time. So I'll just move it over time so you guys can see the graph. So bandpass is saying, okay, we're just going to select an area of frequencies and you can move these over time. Again, a low pass filter, it basically chisels out the high frequencies. Okay, so how can we use this? What I can do is create a chord. Let's create a chord progression here. Let's just record something in. Okay, so now we have a chord progression. What we can do is hear our movements over time. So let's say you want to be animated, even with my voice. If you guys look at my voice under Wave Candy, let me route my microphone over to channel 1 so you guys can see this. So let's first look at my voice. So when I say Busy Works beats, look at that S. The S is really just an area of frequency. It almost looks like noise, which it really is because it's not a shaped vowel sound. It's not a shaped consonant. And so it's just a bunch of noise, S, but it kind of is dense in a certain amount of area. Okay, but look at my voice. I go up, I go down, up, down. Okay, you can see my voice doesn't just do the same thing over and over and over. You know what? I go, wow, like wow, wow. We're opening and closing our mouth. So therefore, that's a built-in low-pass filter. And what I'm trying to tell you guys is if speech is this dynamic and I'm not really like using any crazy voice inflections, then what do you think our sounds need to do to sound lively? Okay, so what we can do is use a filter to make our sounds feel a little more alive. So let's go back to Serum here, and I'll give you guys a couple cheat sheets here. So what I want to do here is set an LFO. Let's just make it look like this. This is called a ramp because it looks like a skate ramp. And let's drag this LFO, it's called, over the what's called cutoff frequency. We can select what's called a range here. So I can left click this little blue icon to select the range. Now, whenever you modulate things or control things with other things in Serum, wherever the knob points to, this is the end point. Wherever the blue thing goes to is the starting point or the range, I'll call it. Let's call it a range. Okay, because it could start here at the pointer, go out here, and then come back. But that's, I don't want to bore you guys to tears. So basically, wherever the knob points is the end point. So that will help you guys understand the blue thing versus the pointer. So now we can give motion to this filter. Let's slow it down with what's called the rate. And now we have like an R&B type of vibe. Now let's make this range even wider so that it starts low, low, low frequencies and then goes all the way up to the high frequencies. It even gives you a value when you hover. So now you know how low these frequencies go. And now we can see the shape here. It starts at the low. Again, it's like my mouth. It's like my hand over my mouth, and then I remove my hand. We're going to have more high frequencies coming through. So the same thing here. It starts with that, it goes from the fundamental, and it builds all the harmonics up. Let's lower the range so that we're not going so high up in frequency here by moving this blue knob. Okay, we can also switch the filter type. Let's do a high pass filter. See how that doesn't make sense really in context? Let's try a band pass filter. This could be used depending on the purpose. But again, band pass is more for like sound effects. So most of the time we're using low pass filters. Now these numbers, when it says low pass filter 12, 24, 18, it's basically the intensity of filter. This stands for the dB per octave. You don't need to memorize what that means. The lower numbers are basically softer filters. The higher numbers are more aggressive, hard filters. So 24 is a very aggressive filter, meaning we're not getting any ghost frequencies that aren't under that curve. So that's just showing you one way to use a filter. Okay, now most people, when they're using filters, they use it to shape, again, the harmonics. What is the harmonic structure of a sound? It's just how many frequencies a sound is, quite literally. So let's start again. Let's keep applying all these concepts so you could, so you guys can see how this stuff adds up. Again, I need you guys to smash that like button for the enthusiasm today. This is a free sound design course for beginners, so I really got to bring you guys the sauce. Next, let's talk about Unison. So let's reset this. Unison is like a choir, okay? It's basically anything called an oscillator is like a person. So Unison is adding more of those people to your equation, let's say. Okay, so right now we have, let's switch it to let's switch this back. Let's switch this to a sine wave. Now, because I'm playing multiple notes, it shows up as multiple frequencies, but remember, each sound is only playing that fundamental sound, that fundamental frequency. So even though it shows up as multiple frequencies on our graph, it does not mean the sound itself has multiple frequencies, okay? So what I want to cover here is unison. So if I add unison, it basically duplicates the sound and it pans it either left and right. Now, the way our ear works is that when you have a sound that's exactly the same between your left ear and your right ear, it actually feels like it's mono. Let me show you. It's better to show you than to like try to explain this. So for beginners here, whenever you're trying to make stuff sound wider, width is about difference. Okay, so if I add this plugin here, 3x OSC, I turn the oscillator 2 and 3 volume all the way down, and I have a tone. Let's make it lower so it doesn't blow your ears. Okay, so here's the tone. Now, if I clone this and I add another tone, it's just going to double the volume because +1 met a +1 and then now it's +2. What if I invert this so that +1 meets a -1? Okay, so to invert the sound, is there an inversion tool? Let me see. If I send it to the mixer, we should have a flip polarity switch. So in theory, if this is a perfect polarity switch, this should have silence. As you guys hear silence. Now, if I click this button to flip the polarity, meaning my +1 has been flipped to a -1, and because the first sound was +1, okay, now the +1 arch is meeting a -1, it cancels out to 0 because I flipped what's called the polarity. So this is called wave cancellation. Now, if I do anything to the pitch, the timing of the sound, it will reveal itself because now we don't have the perfect shape meeting its perfect opposite. I know this sounds more complicated, but what I'll do here is I'll delay the second sound. So remember, +1 is the first sound. It's going up like an arch. -1 is the second sound going downward like an arch. So when a +1 arch meets a -1 arch, you get 0. Now, what happens if I change the timing to where now the +1 arch has what's called a primary phase, but then the -1 arch is not the same phase or the same timing as that first +1. So now it is subtracting from the +1, but it's not the same amount of subtraction. So if I move any time, this should now be heard. Okay, because we move the timing of the notes. Now, if I also do something like change the pitch, then we have a difference between the first sound and the second sound, even if I flip the polarity, it's called. So now it should create this wobbly sound. And this is called negative wave interference because we have, again, +1s meeting -1s, and they all have different timings. Okay, so it creates this wobbly sound because I'm pulling away the energy of the first sound. Okay, so that's essentially what the core of sound is either positive wave interference or negative wave interference. I know that went PhD really quickly, but I'll show you guys why that is important. Because to create what's called width, okay, it's not just about panning one thing hard left and hard right. Because right here we have one sound. All right, so what happens if I pan the sound to the left? It's the same sound, just pan to the left. Now, if I add another sound and I pan the sound to the right, you would think this is what beginner people do with their vocals too. You know, they'll pan one left, they'll just duplicate the same vocal take, pan one left, pan one right, and they think it's gonna make it sound wider. Let me show you guys the magic of this. So right now we have one sound pan to the right, one sound pan to the left. And what do you guys think is going to happen when I combine these? Let you guess. Okay, so here's what happens if we combine the same exact sound with the same exact timing, same exact pitch, same exact everything. One's pan hard left, one pan hard right. So what happens? They're both playing right now. Let me route this to the same thing so you guys can see. So you're like, what happened? We have two sounds, but it sounds like one sound. That's because when you pan the same exact thing on the left and the same exact thing on the right, literally with the same, traits, our brain creates mono. I'll use a different word. Our brain creates the center image, okay? It creates this. That doesn't exist. Our brain creates that. We have a left ear and a right ear. Where's this middle ear come from? Do we have a middle ear? Our brain synthesizes that. That's the magic of our brain. Okay, so same sound on the left, same sound on the right. If we combine those, playing at the same exact time, it sounds like the same one sound in the middle. So stereo width is not just panning stuff left and right. It has to have a difference of timing or pitch. So let's add a pitch difference here between the left and the right. And now we'll start to hear this wobbly, blurry sound. And now our brain can perceive stereo width. To prove this, let's pull up a stereo width analyzer from Isotope. So you guys see this is a vertical line that represents a mono signal. Now, the moment I change the pitch of any of the left or the right signal, it will now create a difference between your left and your right ear. And that difference is called width. And now you can see it now has a width, okay? So that's what width actually is. It's detuning either the left voice or the right voice from one another so that they're perceived as different. Okay, so that's what I'm showing you here when I talk about unison. It's adding another voice. When it says two, it means two voices, two people singing the same thing, but we're creating a difference between the two. So one person could sing, oh, the next person sings a little flat, oh, or maybe, I don't even know how to sing that flat, oh, something like that. But because there's a slight difference, it creates this nice, wide, lush sound. So that's where this comes from. Let's play our chords back. And now let's add what's called unison. Now the magic number is 7, so you guys can kind of just start at 7, and if it's too much, just pull it back. This is your Drake sound here. Old school Drake. Just unison sine waves. Because what is it? It's that fundamental frequency slightly detuned from one another. So the detune amount is how detuned are they? So if I pull this in, they're going to be less detuned, meaning less difference between your left and your right, which means more centered of an image. And if I detune them even more, it's going to be more pitch difference. But this might be what's called dissonant based on how they stack up. So that doesn't sound too good to my ear. Let's pull this back. So I've noticed that 50% mark is usually the sweet spot. And what happens if I change the waveform? Okay, using the same concept of unison. Here's a sawtooth. Let's pull in the detune. It's going to sound more metallic because now we're making that sawtooth fight for the same frequency space, and now we have more wave interference. And you guys can visually see, let me switch sides here with the synth. So when I pull in the detune, look at how much separation there is in the frequency. I'm actually going to mute the output just so we can not get tired of the sound here. Actually, you need to hear this, so never mind. Now what we're going to do is up that unison. So see how much, separation there is between the frequency. So up the unison, detune. Now what does this look like? This looks like white noise. It's not because it's white noise. It's because we have so many harmonics stacked up that are all playing slightly different pitches. And so you have all these gaps being filled up frequency wise. And so it becomes more washy, sounding like a white noise. This is called a supersaw. Okay, so that's the power of Unison. We can go deeper and deeper with Unison, but that I just wanted to get down to the fundamental concept of Unison for you guys. So next up, let's talk about mod envelopes. So think of an envelope as, you know, the shape of a sound. We can shape many things. So by default, envelope 1 in Serum correlates to the amplitude. Amplitude is the volume of a sound. So for example, if I hold a note, it just holds because we have what's called sustain on. So if I turn sustain down, we don't have any more sustain, so I can't just hold the note anymore. So now it's based on what's called a decay curvature. And decay means to die over time, meaning the sound will fade over time. So if I hit notes now, let me switch the view here so we could actually see this more clearly, I should say. So notice the sound hits and then it goes into this purple because it has an intensity and then it dies out. Okay, so natural sounds like a piano, when you hit a piano, it doesn't just hold the piano sound, it actually fades over a certain amount of time. So in Serum, we can set how long the sound lasts by adding what's called the decay curvature. I can make it 10 seconds, I can make it 3 seconds. Okay, so that's a synthetic, that's a synthetic sound. But if we had something more organic like a piano, you know, piano has a realistic fade. The same way you pluck a guitar doesn't just play forever into infinity. The same thing here is that we can design how long the sound lasts. So that's called the decay curvature. The attack time, rarely do we touch this. This is more for pads and for very specific use cases, but rarely do we mess with the attack. But the attack adds a swelling to the sound. So if I add the attack, if I increase this, this is how long it takes for the sound to reach its peak volume, okay? So again, this is for more like padsy stuff. Let's make it a long decay and a long attack time. And we could even shape that curvature so it's not as sharp by just right clicking in Serum. Now most, you know, if you're going pad, you're going to have a really long attack and a really long decay. Again, it's just saying how long does it take for this sound to reach its peak volume. So it's like me going, and then I keep going up in volume. That's what the attack time is doing. Okay, so rarely do we use that. Again, we use that for more like pads. Okay, so I'm going to set this to like 0.5 milliseconds. So a millisecond is 1,000th of a second. That's how fast the attack times are. So you can get a pretty decent sound just from a long decay curvature. You don't always need sustain. Later in the, you know, maybe a different video, a different course, we'll talk about how to use sustain for sound design. But sometimes people overly use sustain, and it's the reason why their sounds don't feel like dynamic. But we can go deeper with that later. So what are some things we can automate with the envelopes? So by default, envelope 1 controls the volume. We can add different shapes to different things. So I could have this square shape control, you know, my low pass filter, for example. So let's add a filter here and let's grab envelope 2, drag that over top of what's called the cutoff frequency. And now I can have this shape dictate this knob. So basically we're giving an envelope to the shape. In real life, you could twist the knob, but because this is digital, I can technically modulate this or automate this, I should say. But I would rather have an envelope control the curvature. So in real life, you would just turn the knob to the right or turn it to the left. Well, we can have the computer say how it's going to turn the thing to the left or the right using what's called an envelope. So here with the envelope, I'm going to create a decay curvature. So now this decay curvature says I'm going to start the knob at the top of this range, and I'm going to turn the knob down over 1.93 seconds. Let's make it 2 seconds. It's going to take 2 seconds to turn the knob from the right all the way to the left. That's what we're telling this envelope to do. And this creates a more dynamic performance. So if I were to I hold that note, it now fades the actual sound. Okay, so that's, whereas if I turn this filter off, it doesn't have that same fade away. So a lot of people use these quick envelopes to shape the harmonics of a sound. So they might use a faster decay. So this makes it more of a plucky sound. The more decay curvature you add at a very sharp amount of time to the cutoff filter, that's a low pass filter, it creates a more of a pluck sound. If I increase the decay, okay, it creates more of a sustained sound. Now we could do cool stuff. Now this is just an example. We can grab the LFO, for example, and we could tell this automated shape. That's basically what an LFO is, a low frequency oscillator. It's just a shape that we design that just keeps going. But it's really low frequency to where we can't hear it. It just controls stuff. So we're going to tell this LFO to control the decay curvature, meaning we're going to have the decay curvature sound like a pluck in the beginning and then have it go up to a more sustained sound. And let's do the range as a bar. So as I play the sound to the it has to be to a metronome because it doesn't know what a bar is when you play without the metronome, or to the let me do a longer than a bar. Let's do like 4 bars. Let's do 8 bars. Okay, so now when I play, it should, oh, you know what it does? It bases it off the trigger, so I'm incorrect there. So this is actually trigger based, so let's make this smaller. So I'm holding notes for it to perform like this. So what it's doing is it's saying, hey, we want the decay curvature low here at the beginning of this envelope and then high. So we're creating a range for this decay curvature in real time. Okay, so now, let me make it longer so you guys can hear more of the change. Just some cool things you could do. Not that you have to do it that way, but I'm just showing you guys you don't need to always stick with stagnant parameters in your sound design. So again, I want to show you guys more use cases about that. I don't want to go too deep about envelopes because I don't want to confuse you without like real use cases. But this is called a low frequency oscillator because it's a low frequency sound making thing. It's just we can't perceive it. And think of, modulators as the big brother and the thing that we're modulating, or the destination it's called, as the little brother. So the big brother shakes the little brother and the little brother's like, hey, like that. Okay. That's what modulators do. You have LFO modulators, envelope modulators. You can modulate literally in the matrix. You could use anything as a modulator. Any of these things listed here can be modulation sources. We don't need to get like super esoteric in this video, but basically the modulator is the big brother trying to shake something, and the destination, it's called, or the thing to be controlled, is the little brother. Okay, so that's how that works. So let's see like what real use cases I would use for an LFO. Again, I would drag my LFO over usually the cutoff filter so that it has movement over time. So again, it's telling the cutoff filter to go from this low value to this high value over time. Meaning if I were turning a real knob, it's saying turn the knob from all the way to the left to all the way to the right over 4 bars of time. Okay, so that's just setting a range. So some cool things to use an LFO for are the cutoff filter, but also too, the pitch. So this is how we create what's called vibrato. So let's go to a new LFO here. We can go to what's called the folder, and switch out what's called the shape. Now for vibrato, we're going for either a sine wave or a triangle wave. Let's do a triangle wave for now. And we're going to drag this LFO over what's called the fine-tuned pitch. So the fine-tuned pitch basically has a max range of 100 cents. If you guys didn't know, every time you hit a note on your keyboard, it plays a specific frequency. And to get to the next note on your keyboard, it's one semitone. So one semitone can divide into what's called 100 cents. So think of a semitone as like $1. So every note on your keyboard is $1, $2, $3, $4, like that. But the difference between $1 and $2 is 99 cents. So there's an in-between of $1 to $2. It's not just $1 to $2. It's $1.05, $1.50, $1.25, or whatever. So this is what's called the fine-tuned pitch. It's divvied up into what's called cents, the same way $1 is divvied up into what's called cents. Because again, there's a lot of in-between notes you can actually mess with. So most of the time, the vibrato is when you use an LFO or like something that moves like this, like my voice is going up and down in pitch over time. So we're using an LFO, like a triangle, like a triangle, like a sine wave, and we're modulating. The big brother is shaking the little brother. What is the little brother? The fine-tuned pitch, usually within a range of like 30 cents. Okay. So now when I play this note, let me turn sustain up. Usually this is best with sine waves too, because it's easier to hear. And we can set the range higher, but the range isn't the problem. It's the speed of this LFO. So if you can't hear an LFO most of the time, it's because the speed is too slow. So let's go down here where it says BPM. Let's turn this off so that we have a hertz reading. And I've noticed anything from 3 hertz to 5 hertz is more audible for vibrato. So now the vibrato is going like, Also, I forgot we have multiple voices. So that's what vibrato is. If I turn off the LFO modulation here, you're not going to hear that. It's just going to sound like a stale tone. Just not very animated at all. You can even visually see it's not moving at all. But if I turn this modulation back on, the pitch goes up and down. If I change the range to a bigger range, it's going to sound more dramatic. Let's add what's called monophonic and legato mode to make the notes slur. If you want a more realistic vibrato for your lead sounds, for example, you can add what's called delay. So it takes time before the vibrato kicks in. See how it takes time? It goes flat and then it goes up. We can also smooth this out so it doesn't just go woo, just out of nowhere. We can create like an attack time for this effect, basically. So that's how I would do my leads most of the time, is I would give it a subtle delay so it doesn't just automatically go straight to vibrato. And this is a human way to, synthesize your sound. Okay, so now you have that movement like a human voice would have. So that's how we use LFOs most of the time for filter cutoffs or for the fine-tuned pitch so that it creates a vibrato effect. Anything else outside of that is really advanced sound design and more specific, but that's usually what we use LFOs for in a broad sense. Next, let's talk about multiple oscillators. Let's go to the menu here. Now, at this point in the journey, if you've made it this far, you are past 95, probably 99% of the people in sound design, because you understand what makes a sound, what is a sound, how to move a sound, how to modulate a sound to make it different. This point on is the 1%. Okay, this is getting into the various ways to be an expert. Okay, so if you made it this far in the video, let's see how long we've been on this video. 44 minutes. If you made it this far, you are way ahead of so many people. Okay. So next, let's talk about multiple oscillators. Let's go back to our first sound here. So let's say you want to create a more unique sound and you're like, okay, sawtooth, everybody uses it. Let's up this to 7 voices, for example. But let's say you want to make it a little bit different. Let's add another oscillator. So another oscillator is like another person singing. Let's switch this to a basic sine wave here. But what happens if we lower the oscillator 2 octaves? We actually get layered sound. This is great for bass. So if I lower this 2 octaves, for example, I turn off oscillator A. We have a sine wave underneath. Let's make these closer an octave here. Now what happens if I switch this waveform to a square wave? This will create more of a distorted sound because now we have negative wave interference here. The square wave is so low, it distorts the waveform to sound like it's distorted. So the lower we go, the more distorted. Because now it's so low we can't hear it, we're feeling it. This is what a low frequency oscillator basically is doing. It's so low of a frequency, it just moves the thing. In this case, it creates negative wave interference, meaning it controls the amplitude. So let's up the oscillator here. So that's how they get these really full sounds. They layer different oscillators. Let's add another sub oscillator here. But this time let's use a sine wave, which is going to give us more of that boomy sound. Now it's just a matter of mixing these levels. Everything can't be the loudest thing. So let's turn down the square. So think of the square as like an effect. We're adding that sound to it. And think of the sawtooth as like an edgy sound. And think of the sub bass, if you guys can't even hear it. It's so low you guys can't even hear it. Let's go 1 octave higher. So it's just reinforcing that fundamental frequency that sits underneath that sawtooth. So it stands out more in frequency. That's called positive wave interference. Now let's add that square back in for texture. Now you have a super wide saw. Some people call this a respace. Now we can go even deeper into what's called frequency modulation. Now frequency modulation is similar to the brother, like I said, shaking the little brother, and the little brother's like, ugh. Well, what if you did that even faster, like light speed? You're like, you just shake your little brother super fast, and I don't wish that upon anyone. Let's go to FM from B, for example. So what it's going to do is this frequency is going to control this frequency. This oscillator is going to control oscillator A. We don't actually have to have oscillator B even on. I could turn the volume off, and I could just up what's called the FM from B, and it will shape the tone based on these characteristics of oscillator B. So FM is probably, let me just do this with the sine wave. It makes more sense so you guys can understand. Okay, so a sine wave. So here's a regular sine wave. Just a horizontal. Now this is an analog sine wave, so it has some harmonics here. What happens if I frequency modulate, where the big brother theoretically shakes the little brother? Let's up what's called the frequency modulation from B. And now we're getting more harmonics in different areas depending on this wave form. Sounds almost like a didgeridoo. We're just activating different resonance points in the harmonic structure. So this is how you get those like weird EDM sounds. Are like, how'd they even make that sound? It's most likely the FM frequency modulation. So again, we can go really, really deep with frequency modulation. It almost to a level where it's just not, it would take 2 hours. I've done it before, trust me. Okay. So what can we do with this FM? We can add an envelope, for example, envelope 2. Let's drag this over top the FM. Remember, wherever this pointer points to, that's the end point. The blue area is the range. So envelope 2, let's give this a decay curvature so it fades over time. Let's tell it to go up to the max value as pictured here, and then down to the minimum value. So it's going to basically start here where it's pointing. It's going to turn the knob all the way here and then turn back over this amount of time. So this is how we create those UK basses, for example. Let's add some unison to the main oscillator. Now, how do we pull out that last final touch? We go to the effects tab and then we add some compression. Now, most people don't know there's a multi-band mode. This is basically OTT if you turn this knob up. Now, what if we added this envelope over top of what's called the low pass filter? Here's why I said this section of the video is like going from the 9% to the 100%, you know. Even though we're not covering everything about sound design, there's still millions of things to learn from the 99% all the way up to 100%. There's a million things to learn. There's so much to learn. Okay, so what happens if I add this same envelope over the filter cutoff? Let's lower the range, however. We can even do what's called velocity sensitivity, meaning how hard I hit a key, and I can set a range. So if I hit the key harder, the range will go from 20 to 70 to 30 to 90. But if I hit it softer, it might go to 10 to 60. It just moves the range around. And this is the part that people don't add in their sounds, and that's why their sounds don't feel like alive. There's no dynamic or change built into the sound. Now we can also use envelope 3. I'm showing you guys more like high level stuff at this point. We can use this envelope to control what's called the coarse pitch. So coarse pitch goes beyond just that one semitone range of 100 cents. It also goes, you know, from 1 note to 10 notes away. So we can create what's called a decay curvature. So this is your like type sound. Okay. We can lower the decay curvature here. It's got a little, it's called hyper and dimension. Let's turn off hyper mode, which is basically just adding more. It's duplicating the sound and detuning it. Let's add what's called dimension, which is called early reflections. Now what happens if I raise the octave of the big brother that's shaking the little brother? We get a more metallic sound. So the higher you go with the modulator, the more metallic sound you get when you use FM synthesis. Okay, so there you have, I think it's called what, UK Garage, if I'm not mistaken on the exact genre. So I'm just showing you guys how these simple things add up to these really complex sounds. So to wrap this video, we went over so many fundamentals that I have to give you inspiration to show you guys how many sounds you guys can actually create. So firstly, let's build our super saw. Super saw is super easy. We're just going to grab the unison, turn this up to 7. That's just a good starting point. I like to keep mine at 50% unless it's too detuned. That's all we really need. Maybe a touch of a filter, you know, and then maybe some modulated filter. So I would use usually velocity over the filter and then give it a range. So I'm going to pull in this range. Basically, I want the cutoff filter to be barely used. So we're going to give it a range of like the maximum value down to maybe 80%. Let's pull it maybe to like 50-ish. So if I play soft, even that isn't really, let me widen the range even further. Let's go even further. Let's see, we could probably take this all the way down. So if I play really soft, you know, we get this kind of mysterious vibe. And now if I play harder, we're gonna open up that filter, and this is just based on your performance. All right, so that's how we can do a more performative approach, which is use what's called velocity, or how hard we hit the keys to control something. In this case, it's the filter or the harmonic. So it's the same thing as me singing. I could sing like this, or I could belt the lyrics and be super aggressive. Now I'm not gonna wake my son up. He's behind this wall, so I dare wake him up. But yeah, it's like the difference between whispering and singing like this, but then talking like this, where it's like screaming. It's the same thing as, you know, using velocity to dictate how much harmonic is in your sound. So that's called a supersaw. Quickly, now this is not a full tutorial, so you guys got to bear with me on not covering everything about everything. I just want to show you guys the principles here. Let's create a kick drum. So a kick drum is usually based on a sine wave that plays a fundamental frequency, the lowest note. Now we can use what are called envelopes. Let's pull back the sustain here to give this a decay curvature. Let's drag this over the coarse pitch. So now the pitch goes like that. Let me turn this up. Now what happens if we go but faster? Let's lower the decay curvature. It actually creates a punch sound. And that's actually what a kick is. The punch of it is the pitch bend. Now you guys know how to make a kick. Now I'm skipping over a lot of other steps involved with a kick, but that's pretty much the gist of a kick, is just that pitch envelope. So let's talk about a vibrato lead. Let's initialize this back to the beginning, and let's make a lead here. So with leads, you usually build these to be played one note at a time. And I say usually because not all leads are the same. Let's go here. Okay, we're gonna turn on what's called monophonic mode. Mono means one. It means one voice can be played at a time, one thing, one singer at a time. Then we're gonna add what's called legato. This allows us to slur the notes so that we can overlap notes. Get that West Coast like lead type sound. Hear how it pitch bends. Now, if we want to exaggerate that pitch bend effect, we could turn on what's called portamento. So it creates a slower bend between the notes I play. And that's how you get that like super whiny West Coast sound, is that portamento is turned up. So we could use portamento in many different cases, but a lead sound really comes down to that. Now, another thing we can add to lead is a vibrato. We did cover this earlier, but let's cover it now. We're going to add the LFO. Remember, when I sing, I go, ah, aren't I doing a motion? It's like, ah, and I'm doing a pattern. So we're going to select the pattern here. We could grab the thing here, go to basic, go to sine wave or triangle, either one. Drag the LFO over the what's called fine-tuned pitch. Okay, we usually pull the range in because too much vibrato can sound like very... Okay, so now it's going like... It's too wide of a range. Let's left click this blue thing and pull the range in. Okay, so that's also called depth, depending on which plugin you use. And now let's take off the BPM and give it a hertz value. Again, usually 3 hertz to 6 hertz is like the range for vibrato. So now it's going like super fast. And again, you can add that delay with the smooth, so it smooths it out. See how that vibrato kicks in over time? So that's the importance of vibrato. Again, we could use it more aggressively, which is like this. There's different cases where it just is based on you guys' creativity. There's no right or wrong way to do vibrato. Lastly, let's talk about sub bass. What is sub bass? It comes down to that fundamental frequency. So if we switch the wave shape back to a sine wave here, play really low notes, or we could select the octave, pardon me. So this is, the starting tone. Let's drop the octave. I found that sub bass is usually -2 in that -2 octave range. Usually with sub bass, you don't want the notes to overlap because they can clash and create negative wave interference. So we're going to turn on what's called monophonic mode, legato mode, maybe a little portamento. So this means basically the notes won't overlap by mistake. And that's all you really need to do for sub bass and play low octaves like this. You guys might not even hear this on your headphones, but it's playing a super low frequency to fill out the sound. So sub bass means below. Sub means below. It's below the bass. So it's the octave that you can't even hear most of the time. All right, so let's finish this off with like a rant. I'm just gonna show you guys. Let me see if I have my sounds on here. I think I do, but I don't have my sounds on here. So let's start from scratch and let's build a dope sound for this pad, and then we'll wrap this up. And again, if you guys want to learn more about sound design, like how to create your own drum kit from scratch, go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. I have a whole sound design course on how to sound design your drum kit. And I have a much more in-depth course there. Again, starting from beginners, but I cover more things in the other course too. So let's go all the way back here. First thing I usually do is set this to 7. Now, one kind of advanced technique is to go to the matrix. Let's go to source, note on alternative. I took this from a retro synth I used to mess with called the Prophet 6. And we're going to turn the amount up. Destination is oscillator A pan. We want it bipolar, meaning left and right. So basically, every time I hit a note, it will go to the opposite side. So this allows me to turn down unison and get a cleaner, more structured sound, but still be able to get that wide analog feel, but without using a bunch of unison, without using detune. Now we have like that analog feel. So that's one of my analog secrets. Taken from Dave Smith Instruments, RIP. Okay, so that's one of my secrets. So I just showed you guys. So let's hear it now. Now this sound itself needs more smearing because it's so lush. It needs a little more cushion for the sound, like more chorusy sound. So let's add that detune only for the fact that it's a little too metallic and harsh. Add some portamento to pitch in between the chords. Actually, I forgot we played fast at the end, so that's not going to work for the end part. Let's just solo this out. Let's solo this part. So anytime I'm playing slow, I could play portamento. Basically, a pitch bends between the chords, so it sounds nice. Especially when you have a saw sound. Let's take off this matrix only because now I'm using unison, so it's just too much modulation here. Let's add some kind of filter movement in here. Let's add LFO1 over the filter. It's a pretty cool sound. Now resonance, I didn't describe this, but basically it's an EQ boost at the cutoff frequency. The cutoff frequency is basically like where the filter is either cutting or removing the harmonics. So resonance point is just enhancing that specific point in time with a boost. It makes sounds feel more lasery, basically. Okay, so now we have a dope sound. Let's add some white noise in here. Actually, you know what we should do with that? Let's add white noise, but then run the noise through the filter. So in Serum, you can actually select which things go through the filter. In this case, let's select the white noise. Let's also reshape this. So now we have a transient type shape. Let's up the timing here. And now I want something that pans the noise left and right. So let's add an LFO here over the pan. So now I have some kind of thing that grabs my ear. And we could change out the actual noise thing, and we can also shape the noise. Let's switch this to what's called a bandpass filter. So now it's more of a lasery sound I'm adding in. Let's also make this triplets here. So now we have a really unique sound. Again, this saw sound is a little too clean for me. Sometimes I like that bitey tone, and that's why I use that note on alternative feature. What we could do is just reduce the amount of voices. Sometimes it's almost too lush. Let's add oscillator B as a sine wave. And let's make this a frequency modulation with the same envelope. And so now I'm getting really geeky here. We're gonna select an LFO 3, and that will control, how's it gonna work? Actually, never mind, let's take this off. Only because this is messing with the tune. Let's drop this a little bit. Now, usually I do FM on sine waves, not sawtooth, so we're probably just forcing that. Let's just not force that. So it's like, what else can we do to the sound? I mean, it's already a full sound. We already have a ton of frequencies in the sound. We could add some effects here. Let's add some delay. These effects work top to bottom. You can also rearrange these. Let's add a compressor. Let's add some reverb up in here. Let's add the reverb before the compressor. Cut out the lows on the reverb. Spin is the chorusy effect. Pulling in the range of the noise so it doesn't sound so high frequency. Let's switch to be different. Let's switch the waveform from a sawtooth, because the sawtooth is too easy. So now we really hear that noise, because now it's not blending in with the harmonics of that sawtooth. Now we can really hear what that noise is doing. Let's up our unison here. And now we can use that FM. And let's use this on envelope 3. Let's give it a really long attack time. Drag this up. So again, wherever it points is the end point. The blue part is the range. So I'm going to select the range like this. Actually, in this case, it's going to start. This is the 0 point, I forgot. It's going to start here, go up to a max value, and then come back down, depending on our settings. Let's just have it sustain so it stays there. So now, depending on how long I hold the chord, it creates more harmonics using FM synthesis. So if I hold it longer, that's why I said I use FM on sine waves more than sawtooth. It just has an easier sound. Let's turn the level of the noise down. You could also switch out the noise types. I think the sound is pretty dope. So to save the sound, we're going to click this little save icon. We're going to create a new folder. Let's call it like sound design course. I'll give you guys this preset for free. If you go to busyworksbeats.com/FL Studio, sign up for free. What are we going to call this? Like pad freebie? I don't know. Okay, so now we have that. If we ever wanted that, we would click the drop down, go to user, find our folder, and there's our preset right there. Now you could do weird things here. I'm just going to show you guys a little bit of serum, and then we're going to wrap this because it's probably been over an hour. Yeah, an hour and 9 minutes. So nextly, let's go to the menu here. Let's go to resample to oscillator A. So we'll take the sound and basically print it into oscillator A as a wavetable. So now we can use this wavetable. Now I've seen this used for bass more so let's pull this down. It's a little hard to hear. So this is a little quirky of a sound. Wouldn't use this really in practice. Maybe if I added in a quicker envelope here. Let's have the envelope go over the wavetable position. So now it will cycle these frames. So now we're getting a really weird. Let's just lower the range of envelope 3. So now we're getting into like video game sound design more than like I would use in a record. This sounds like some like PlayStation game. So yeah, it gets crazy. Wonder what happens if you play multiple notes. Let's play chords. We might blow up a computer today. Yeah, it sounds crazy. Crazy bad. Yeah, don't play chords with this one. But just showing you guys how far you can take it. Not the greatest sound at the end there. I would definitely play this though. That's pretty hard. And I would just find ways to make it more dynamic over time. Maybe modulate the distortion and the filter so that it doesn't just stay here. All right, guys, but that is the magic of sound design. And now you understand the fundamentals. You guys can go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. All I ask you guys to do is smash the like button, subscribe if you're new, share with a friend, and get to making some dope sounds. And if you want to become a master at this, go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. Peace out, guys.